This idea of a pickup artist has been something that it's never really kind of resonated with me. I always thought it was a bit of a bullshit concept, mainly because I think it's something from kind of a bygone era where, you know, people would kind of look up to these like idols, or like this kind of glorified notion of like a pickup artist, who would, to be quite frank, would be using like techniques and tricks and just general kind of manipulation to be attractive to the opposite sex. That's kind of where it's all really derived from. And like, for example, going into a bar, putting it on some sort of performance, just because essentially being yourself and being an attractive guy fundamentally was not necessarily seen as being good enough. You always have to put some kind of show on top of that in order to be attractive. But that's kind of where it's all stemmed from, and I've always thought that was kind of bullshit. My kind of philosophy really is about kind of being your authentic self, so not necessarily fundamentally changing up your personality to fit in with someone else's because you see them getting success or whatever, but being your authentic self, but at the same time having some kind of understanding of like female psychology and having a framework in your in your mind about how to develop attraction, how to engage with the opposite sex, etc., in order to essentially build a foundation of a relationship. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. So would I define myself as a pickup artist? No, I wouldn't. I just find that really cringy, and it's just not something that kind of resonates with myself.
And you have negged her. This is to state something that will disqualify you from being considered a potential suitor. Just long enough so that you can demonstrate high enough value to hit those attraction circuits that exist in her head, so that you start getting indicators of interest.
I've always thought that it's always been a case of embracing who you are, so not necessarily changing up your personality in order to fit in with somebody else's or some other sort of preconceived notion of what you need to be in order to be attractive to the opposite sex. Because, you know, I've seen it where, like, you know, guys have seen some other guy maybe on YouTube or somewhere else being successful and then be like, oh, I must copy him, I must say exactly what he says, I must dress exactly like him, I must have exactly the same mannerisms, etc. Whereas I personally don't think it should be like that. I think it should be a more case of just embracing your own sort of quirks and your own personality, and just not being afraid to sort of express that. So building up the confidence to actually be okay with who you are, how you are, and just expressing yourself authentically. But at the same time, a slight middle ground approach in that, you know, there are learned skills involved in terms of building attraction, spiking up emotions, and those conversation skills, having a sort of building up the charisma that you need in order to have, you know, good conversations with the opposite sex. And then of course there's the non-verbal side of things as well, which you know, beginner guys sometimes need sorting out with as well. But yeah, that's kind of the way I see it. I mean, the idea of a pickup artist, you know, for me, you know, I'm just a guy who just goes out and speaks to girls during the daytime. If that makes me a pickup artist, then okay, I guess, but I'm just a guy really, you know, and I coach other guys to do the same thing. That's just the way I see it really. So, you know, I don't usually really like having labels assigned to things anyway. I just feel like it just sort of like pigeonholes you too much.
Lovely, luminous, radiant, exotic, erotic woman I've ever met.
So if you take me for example, you know, I've come from quite an introverted background. I over the years developed confidence in order to do the approaches, and I guess in terms of my own style, I'd say that I have, you know, quite a fun sort of almost like a piss-takey style sometimes when I'm doing approaches, but you know, you don't necessarily have to copy that. You know, if you're slightly more of a serious person, then you should, I guess, embrace who you are in terms of being a serious person, and you don't necessarily have to copy somebody else who's getting success, and by taking on, you know, whatever personality traits you deem to be successful.
Excuse me, is that an Italian accent?
Sorry?
Is that an Italian accent?
What Italian accent?
I thought I heard that you had an Italian... Would you like, could I have your number? Oh, forget it, doesn't matter.
And if you take someone like me, I've not always been someone who was good at doing the flirty stuff, so that's not really something that comes naturally to me. I'd say like the fun stuff, the jokes and having a laugh, taking the piss a little bit, you know, having banter, that stuff does come naturally to me. But the, you know, expressing sexual intent, that for me was actually quite difficult to develop initially. That doesn't really come naturally to me, and so that's kind of where there's that learning process involved, because it's important to actually do those sorts of things in order to express your sexual intent. Cheers for watching. If you'd be interested in one-to-one coaching with me, where we'll go out in public and work on you approaching girls, or more generally with your social confidence, please visit my website ed-game.com.